did you know Last Guardian was originally supposed to come out in 2011? I remember being pretty disappointed about it getting pushed back, though I suppose after its troubled development cycle that almost resulted in the game getting cancelled altogether, I should be thankful that it came out in the first place. As I said in my last video, this is my first time playing Last Guardian, and apart from the Shadow of the Colossus remake, I haven't played through a Team ICO game in 7 years. After having played the game, I've gotta say, I'm not really sure where all the negative reception at launch came from. The Last Guardian is most definitely a Team ICO game through and through. It's an ambitious, charming, and experimental cinematic platformer with an acceptable amount of jank that I've come to expect from Fumito Ueda's games. Of the Team ICO games, The Last Guardian probably borrows more heavily from ICO itself more than Shadow of the Colossus, being more focused on a small child traveling through the ruins of an ancient something or another with a companion while solving physics-based puzzles. In ICO's case, it was everyone's beloved ball and chain, Yorda, the precious ethereal waifu who you protect while you try to escape the Queen's castle, in which you do most of the hard work yourself while Yorda is mostly used to open gates, and occasionally get pulled into ominous black portals from which shadows emerge. I'm not knocking her, obviously. Just like this game, there's a certain charm to the dynamics, but I suppose exploring the design of ICO would be its own video. Since it didn't get covered earlier in this critique series, I felt it necessary to bring up just so I could cover the differences in character dynamics with Last Guardian. Much like ICO, you play as a child, who in this case is known only as the boy, presumably Kratos' son, I'm joking obviously, and your partner this time around is a giant dog-bird beastie named Trico, which should be fairly obvious to anyone that's looked at the fucking cover. Unlike ICO and Yorda, the relationship between the boy and Trico is codependent. The boy is unable to defend himself for the most part, leaving the combat, by and large, to Trico. I did find out pretty late in the game that you can indeed yank the heads off Guardians if they topple over, but other than that, you pretty much don't get much in the way of offensive options, if any. Your role as the boy is primarily relegated to solving environmental puzzles, feeding your doggo, and tending to its wounds after a battle. Trico's role is to protect you during combat and help clear environmental barriers that the boy would otherwise be unable to pass, be it to progress the story or to solve a puzzle. In a sense, the power dynamic has shifted from ICO in such a way that the boy has more in common with Yorda than ICO himself. The idea of leaving the player largely helpless when confronted with danger is an interesting one, especially considering such design decisions are usually relegated to stealth and horror games. The fact that this atypical design decision works as well as it does within this genre is impressive. And the reason it works is because despite being incapable of engaging directly in combat, your agency isn't taken away from you as a player. Save for a few missteps, most combat scenarios offer the boy other things to do while Trico is mopping the floor with the soldiers. Now, I'll immediately contradict myself, as those aforementioned missteps might not even be missteps at all. These scenarios that pit you against hordes of enemies and offer nothing else to do could possibly be viewed as the story trying to make you feel more disempowered than usual. I'd never say these scenarios are bad by any stretch, but they're not exactly engaging for me. If I haven't made it clear enough, much like ICO and Yorda and ICO, the relationship between the boy and Trico is the heart of the story. Story-wise, it's hard to say whether ICO or Last Guardian is better. But unlike ICO, where your attachment to Yorda grew solely within the player as a result of their travels together, it feels like there's a back and forth between the boy, or rather the player, and Trico. A shaky relationship that gradually grows into one of mutual trust where you both seek to aid each other in their moments of desperation, culminating in a powerful scene that can only work because of the build-up leading up to it. Fumito Ueda's ability to create enthralling and unique fantasy settings has always impressed me, and this is no exception. My only real gripe with the game is the camera in the starting room that constantly wrestles control from you, and the occasional tutorial prompts that periodically show out throughout the game when it shouldn't really be necessary. But these are minor issues on an otherwise fantastic experience. By far, the most impressive thing about the game is Trico itself. It's easily one of the most complex NPC companions I've ever seen. I imagine that's a large part of why the game got delayed for so long, and even came close to getting cancelled. Trico manages to feel like a living, breathing creature. All of its actions feel natural, and I only came across one instance in the entire game in which it resulted in some sort of immersion-breaking glitch. His head clipped through a wall, for those wondering. Other than that, Trico is technically impressive. And if we never saw anything like this in games again, I honestly wouldn't be too surprised. Experientially, I'd say that The Last Guardian is on par with ICO. But as a game, I have to say it's probably the most gripping game that Team ICO has put out. This opinion largely comes down to my predisposition to put the overall experience over immediately engaging game design, so if I were to recommend a Team ICO game to other people, I'd usually default to Shadow of the Colossus as it's got more mainstream appeal. But on a personal level, Last Guardian is probably my favorite of the three games. Trico is a good doggo, and I'll fight anyone who says otherwise. Is Last Guardian worth playing? It depends on if you like ICO, to be honest. If you don't like ICO, you probably won't find much to enjoy here. If the only game you played of the Team ICO games was Shadow of the Colossus, it may very well be worth giving a shot, but ICO and Last Guardian certainly aren't for everyone. Bottom line is, I adored it, and my enjoyment of the game is the only thing that matters after all. Sorry this critique was a bit shorter than usual. Talk about one Team ICO game and you automatically limit yourself on the ground you can cover with the subsequent ones, since there's a lot of overlap in their design philosophy. Basically, it only leaves you to talk about the differences. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and hit the bell icon because YouTube is messing with the subscription box again. They won't give us content creators a break, will they? Do you have a different opinion on the game? Feel free to leave it in the comments, I very much enjoy chatting. To keep up to date on the channel's current goings-on and other bullshit from me, consider following me on Twitter, as I'm pretty active on there. And I also have a Patreon that I always forget to mention, so just ignore that. Have a great night, y'all, and I hope this video lit a fire under you.